Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Commercial Real Estate Secrets. I'm your host, Austin Hare, and our guest today is Jeromy Dixson. He's the founder and CEO of the DSO project, and also the founder and CEO of Dental Capital Partners. And he's one of 7 key DSO influencers named by Group Dentistry Now, which is a huge accreditation, 3-time Inc. 500, 5,000 entrepreneur, and he's currently co-founding a new business in the dental AI space. So without further ado, Jeromy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Austin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So cool. You've been in dental, I mean, pretty much your entire career, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
So, how did that come about? Like what made you decide to go down this path?
Yeah. So actually, I've been a very healthy adult in general, but as a child, I had a couple of injuries, a couple of key things that happened to me that put me in the hospital for weeks,
Wow.
combined about a month as a child. So the first thing was in second grade, I had an appendix rupture and I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. That can be life-threatening. Obviously I made it. And then when I was in seventh grade, I had a ruptured bladder actually. So I was in the hospital for a couple of weeks with that. And I was just struck by the healthcare, the doctors, the nurses in medicine in general and healthcare, who just cared so much and helped me through and helped me heal up and become a healthy teenager and an adult. And so when I entered college, I wanted to go in the medical field. And initially I wanted to be a surgeon and go into medicine. And then I started talking to a few doctors who were practicing. This is the mid 90s, and HMOs were becoming, becoming almost universal and changing the face of medicine. And I had 3 different doctors say, hey, you might want to look at dentistry because medicine's changing. And so that was actually what put me on the course of applying to dental school and going down the path that I did.
Wow. And so what time frame in your life was this happening? This is when you were in college or high school or what?
Yeah. So this was in college. So I graduated from high school, and I wanted from about, seventh grade on, I wanted to go into medicine. And so in college, so I was on that path the whole way. So through high school, through college until my third year of college, so till my junior year of college. And then I was in a pre-medical honor society, and we would have doctors come in. And so I asked several of those doctors, I would just, hey, what would you do if you were me? That sort of question. And I heard the message loud and clear. It was pretty obvious that they were worried about the changes. And, they'd say, have a dentist friend. He's got a great life. He seems to love what he does. And so it piqued my interest. I started looking there. I said, this is it. I love the people aspect of it, that I can get to know families and help treat people medically, but also see families generationally. That was initially one of the reasons why
That's cool.
I really loved it. Yeah.
That's cool. So these doctors, they were the doctors that were telling you look at dental. You think it's because there was like less of a workload than a traditional doctor, and they saw they had a little bit more freedom? You think that played into it?
Absolutely. I mean, at the time, I remember looking it up, and the average dentist worked almost 20 hours less per week.
Wow.
But made within a few thousand of the typical family practice or general, internist doctor. So once I saw that metric, it was pretty easy because family was always important to me and still is. And so that was certainly that was one of the metrics. But I went and shadowed my dentist that I had growing up, and just kind of fell in love with the whole, owning your own business and being able to practice medicine in a dental context, and just kind of fell in love with it and went that direction.
Yeah, because when you go to dental school, it's very much clinically oriented, right? Like there's not really a whole lot of like business management or HR talks or strategic.
That's an understatement. Yes, there's not much.
So what was it like then going from going to dental school and then coming out and then working for a guy? Like how did you essentially learn business techniques?
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I didn't grow up. Some people grow up just having a lemonade stand and a paper route, and having little businesses all along the way. I really caught the entrepreneurial bug right after dental school. So up until then, I was a biology major in college, and then I went to dental school and very limited business exposure. My dad had worked in corporate America for most of his whole career, and then switched to owning his own business around the time I finished college. So that was it kind of piqued my interest. And then it was just, I think I just was looking around the environment as a new dentist coming out, looking at kind of reading the tea leaves, looking at, having a vision around the corner of what's next, and realized that that group practice was the future. And this was back in 2004, 2005. And then I just started reading dental economics, just the basic, dental economics. Then I started reading Harvard Business Review. Then I started reading business books voraciously. So back behind me, from like 2005 until 2009, I think I read like 120, 130 business books during that time. So I just caught the bug, but it was after, my formal education primarily. And then I ended up starting MBA school in 2009. So then I went to get the formal business degree, master's degree in business with a healthcare management focus, and started that in 2009. So it was really this awakening, I suppose, of this entrepreneurial, creative part of me that all of the science education had sort of beaten out of me, for a few years. And it was amazing. And it's still continuing. That's what's really fun at 43 years old. So
that's cool. Cause I think a lot of times, we talk about the strategies, which are very important, but it's like, you got to get yourself to a place mentally to execute on the strategies, And so it's not like some people are born with it, they're very lucky, and some people aren't, they have to work on it. But I think everybody can attain it, if they're conscientious and if they focus on it and they're intentional about it. And so
I agree.
do you think reading those books, how much of it was just like helping you get the right mindset and helping get you motivated versus like actual tactical strategy, in the weeds type strategies?
Yeah, I would say it started with a mindset shift first. So there was like a phasing. So I came out of dental school and really I saw what Heartland Dental Care was doing. So Rick Workman's a huge like hero of mine, and really, what they were doing there, hiring, I would say about 40% of my class, it was somewhere around that in 2004, they hired. I went to Southern Illinois University, closest dental school to Heartland, and I wasn't really interested in that model necessarily. But then when I came back to the Northwest and I looked around, I just saw opportunity that I had never thought of or seen before. And so there were a few books that shifted my mindset that I would say was kind of phase one. Number one was a book called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. It's a classic business book. And it's really simple. It's not long. And it talks about a lady who like makes the best pies in the world, and she wants to start a pie shop. So she opens the pie shop, and she's very successful, but she's like wearing all these hats, and it kind of getting burnt out and losing that passion that she had. And so it's sort of her conversation with a business coach or consultant about how to think about her business differently. And it totally changed. It was a pie shop, but it changed the way I thought about dentistry completely, and my role in it. And if owning a group dental practice, kind of the steps to take, and just having the vision of what that could look like, because I was buried for years, the first few years buried under just trying to wear all the hats and do everything and running around putting out fires. And it helped me shift that mindset. And then a couple other books that were just mindset shifting for me were Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And it's a real estate book. You obviously know that book, and you may have an opinion and you may not like it, but for me,
I like
or
it,
you may
actually
love it. But for me, it just some of the basic mindset shifts of, I don't need to be paid by the hour. I can put in work and do it and not be compensated now for something, and kind of delaying gratification for the future. And so that really, I think that shifted my mindset in, I'm doing all this work now, but I'm building something that, potentially could be compensated for in the future. And then 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. There's some weird stuff in there, but there's amazing stuff in there that really, changed my mindset. And really now the way that I live, I've taken a lot of concepts from that, and I have a great work-life balance, and I work really hard and I get a lot done, but I also play, and I also have a great family life and enjoy my life as well. So there were just some mindset shifting things in there, and then then it kind of went to from more to tactical, I would say,
Okay.
in general. And I started reading, books like Good to Great by Jim Collins, and a book that I ran across probably 12, 13 years ago called The Power of Full Engagement. It's not as popular. It's by Jim Lohr and or Tony Schwartz. And it was at a time when I was the managing partner of my budding dental group. And I was just burnt out, probably a little bit. I was tired. I was trying to do all these things, and my health wasn't great. I wasn't able to, I wasn't, exercising like I had always exercised, things like that. And that book taught me to manage my energy and not just my time. And so, that was a very important book. And there's other books like, that I have loved. Success Principles by Jack Canfield is one that just is, anybody that wants to be a successful person, I think, should read that. It just gives you a ton of great information there. And then there's a book that I recently came across, and I've always loved Derek Sivers. He did some TED Talks, and he was an entrepreneur 10 years ago. And then he recently wrote a book, I think last year, called Hell Yeah or No. And I am a huge proponent. Oh, it's just, he's distilled down these simple thoughts that are completely, he calls it the counter melody to conventional wisdom. So like they are, whatever you think the world and the culture and business world is telling you, he's going to give you the opposite view of that, and it's going to make sense. And it just bends your mind, and it helps you think differently. And I love books that help me think outside the box that are not just conventional wisdom. So everything I try to do is like against conventional wisdom as much as I can.
That's it. So, that inspired me. I wrote it down. Is that book on Audible? Do you know? I do most of my reading on Audible now.
Yeah, I think he's published several books, but I actually just went to his website and bought it, and it comes with an audiobook and a paperback. So I'm not sure you can check Audible, but if you just go to sivers.org, it's there too.
Okay. Yeah, it's cool. I'm not familiar with those last two, but I'm very familiar with the E-Myth, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and the 4-Hour Workweek. And those, same for me, were like very influential and I was probably between like 19 and 21, like going through and reading those things and like opening up because at that age too, like you just think you're invincible, like you can just take on the whole world.
Yeah.
And you can do it but you can do it too much, right? Too much to the extreme. And I remember like walking away, especially Rich Dad Poor Dad and the 4-Hour Workweek. Like the combination of all those three made it seem like, oh, well, all I have to do is have an idea, spend 4 hours a week setting it up, and, hire people that are smarter than me, do it, and then walk away and collect checks every single day. And it was like, so much of the extreme of all this. And then you realize like, wait a minute, like that's not actually true. So like there's good and bad within those, right? Like if you really followed 100% of every single thing that they said, like you actually wouldn't be anywhere near as successful as they claim you. Like for instance, Tim Ferriss is a workaholic. I mean, he's never worked 4 hours a week in his entire life, right?
Right. Well, and if you did all of the things that he says that you should do, there's more. It would take more than 24 hours in a day. So yeah. And I think it's to me, it's any book. If you take out a few key principles that help you, you can incorporate into your life. So yes, that's a good disclaimer and a worthy disclaimer on a couple of those books, especially the 4-Hour Workweek. That like I've never worked 4 hour. Well, I probably have worked some 4-hour work weeks, but not when I was building initially building everything.
After
so like,
yeah.
And I don't now. And I can not work or work and I choose to work more than that just because I love it. I love the things I'm doing. When you have a passion for what you're doing, when you're working with great people, that's the key part of it. People can drain your energy or they can give you energy. And you kind of build, I like to build great things with cool people, and that's it. I mean, that's kind of my mantra. Build cool things with great people. And if it doesn't fit that, I'm not going to touch it.
Yeah. I love that. I think you said earlier, one of the things about Rich Dad Poor Dad is like, don't trade your time for money, right? Like don't have
Mhm.
a certain idea, like an hourly rate in your head, like you got to have long-term gratification. And I remember, I still think about it a lot. It's like his poor dad would spend, an hour, or his mom driving across town to save $4 on pork butt when like when they wouldn't go.
Yeah.
And look, when the houses marking went on sale, like, the houses went for sale. No, they didn't bother. Right. And it's like, and I think about that a lot. It's like, why am I, I'm spending time, like, the Starbucks gives notification, like, $1 off drinks, and I get all excited about it. It's like, who cares, right? Like, that's you spend your time like chasing those coupons, like you're never gonna really build wealth. So that was really helpful. And then of course the 4-hour work week, like you don't ever work 4 hours, but it changed my mindset on how I think about productivity. Like, I remember one of his quotes is like, running around shoveling papers all day isn't going to get you on first class to Brazil. and it's just like, what are you doing with your time? Like, are you intentional with your time? Are you structuring it well? Are you actually being productive? Because a lot of times we just like to look productive, especially if you're in kind of like a 9 to 5 or something where you're drawing a salary or an hourly rate. You're not rewarded as much on production. Like, you can just try and look really busy, right? But you're not really going to move the needle forward in your life. And so those two things were like the big, even though there was some, I don't want to say bad advice, but just like, you could take it the wrong way. Those are the two like really good takeaways. And so I love that we have that in common. And it sounds like this obviously may pay dividends in your life.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's yeah, books have always, have used them to change my mindset and open my mind. And then you have to think, you have to take some things in and incorporate into how you think and how you work. And some of the things don't work, and you got to throw those out. And you have to be smart enough to know the difference between the two. And if something's not working, right, then get rid of it. If you think it's going to work and it doesn't work, get rid of it. And it kind of, this whole concept makes me think of something that I started doing back probably 15 years ago. Have you heard of the book Flow?
I haven't.
Flow. Have you heard of the concept of flow? Like, if in life, like if you're doing
Getting in
something
state
and
or getting in flow.
yeah, and you kind of lose track of time, and you're just really focused.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a concept that goes along with all of this, that I look at, like, when am I in flow? When am I just totally focused, totally into it, firing on all cylinders? And when I'm, and when I'm in flow, recognizing it, and then stepping back periodically and looking at what I'm doing and how I'm spending my time and how I'm prioritizing, and saying, okay, I'm gonna readjust my time, my schedule, so that I'm doing more of the things that I'm in flow and less of things I'm not. And I think, the reality is, if you're doing something you love and you're passionate about and you're skilled at, you're going to be better than whoever else is doing it that's not in that state. You're going to be more productive. You're going to, work longer because you enjoy it. I think there's real inherent advantages of having that mindset as well. So just a couple thoughts that,
I
have
love
been
that.
really influential for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, all right. And then, you're kind of, you said you went back to school, you got your MBH, and you're also, sounds like you're reading these books at the time. So what evolved out of that?
Well, I mean, so when I did my, MBA, it was a very interesting time in my life, because I was in the midst of buying out my two partners from my original group. And this was, so I started in 09, I bought them out in 2010. And then, so for it was a 3-year program that I did. Usually an MBA is 2 years, but because I was working full time, I had to stretch out.
Yeah.
So for several years while I was doing my MBA, I was running. I was the sole owner and president of the DSO, and I could literally go to class, on the weekend. We did stuff during the weekends, but I'd go to class on the weekends, and I would go to work Monday, and I would implement those strategies immediately, and I would learn from them, and I would test them, and it was real world practical experience, where most of the time when you go to business school, it's still hypothetical. You might do projects, you might, have theoretical situations, but you're not actually going and implementing things right then. So, that was a huge, I think, benefit to the business. It was a benefit to me. I learned a ton, not just getting the credential or getting the degree. And then I think the other thing it did, it just going to business school changes the way you think in a really positive way that I didn't have before. It just makes you think about see things through a business lens and what's important. And it's not just money. I mean, I think culture, the people piece of dentistry and the people piece of any business that has people in it is probably the most important. Getting the right people on the bus and the right seats and all that, and creating a culture that people want to be a part of, so you can recruit and retain folks. And then the other benefit of that education, I think, was when it, doing what I do now, where I'm working with private equity, family offices, doing the merger and acquisition work that I do, due diligence work, working with investment bankers, working with, mezzanine finance or senior lenders who are financing, large dental groups. I can kind of speak the language. I went to business school, they went to business school. It's kind of like dentistry. There's a dental jargon you learn, like you say words nobody else knows because you make up your own language because you want to sound smart. And and so there's a little bit of that in the business world. And when you go and you do an MBA, you go to business school. So that I think that certainly pays dividends because I know how to speak the language, and I think it's helped fuel success in terms of financing, and certainly in doing the work with investors that I do.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so you bought out, essentially. You said you had two partners, and were you guys at a single location, or how many locations was this?
Yeah, so just kind of back up and kind of how I got to where I am. So I started as I've kind of worn all the hats, and I've been in the group practice my whole life. So I've been an employee dentist, I've been a partner, been a managing partner, solo group owner, sold to private equity backed, DSO CEO and board member, been a board member several times for DSOs. And so I've kind of worn all these hats, and in wearing those hats, it has created a situation where I'm able to speak the language better and understand where people are coming from, and really, especially when there's issues or when there's like when my coaching of CEOs, when they have an issue that's really vexing them, I've probably seen it before because I've worn all those different hats and know what to do. So
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So sounds like that set you up really well for obviously the rest of your career. So what is it like that's been taking up most of your time recently?
Yeah, so I mean, recently, obviously, I have a DSO project that's been, we've been doing some fun work there over the last couple of years, coaching high potential entrepreneurs who own DSOs, and also we've been working to kind of implement a new strategy of how to build a DSO and try to allow the doctors to create to be able to gain more of the upside and the wealth creation opportunity, rather than just like one person who owns the DSO. So that's been fun. Obviously, M&A work has been fun, working with private equity funds, and so buyers and sellers, and matching them up, and that's been something that has been super fun. But recently, this year, I'm in the process. Well, the business has already been founded, so I've co-founded a business that is going to transform the dental transaction space, leveraging the artificial intelligence that has been, is and has been created, and it's launching. We're probably 6 to 8 weeks away on that. Wow. So more to come on that, but it's going to allow folks to have a much broader and deeper view of what they're purchasing in a dental transaction, whether it's a single practice or a group practice. And it's going to also have a component that's forward-looking, to know what's inherently embedded in the charts in terms of treatment, as well as I think the first real objective doctor quality assessments as well. So there's a lot of pieces of it that I'm super excited. Maybe I'll come back on it in a while, and we can go deep on that, because that's some fun stuff.
I love talking about that kind of stuff too. I mean, artificial intelligence obviously has already changed the world to a lot, and it's going to continue to change the world. And you know, it can be good or bad, right? A lot of people get scared when they think about it, but it's just a technology. You know, technology is not inherently good or bad. It's what you do with it. But that is really cool. So you know, you said it would be able to help calculate kind of like a forward-looking perception or forward-looking lens. So is that one thing? Is that one of the main things? Like, because the risk is when you go and you buy a business, it's like, okay, great. Like, we see your last 12 months of EBITDA. We see your combined 3-year average of EBITDA profits, whatever you want to call it. But there's no guarantee that that's going to work moving forward, right? Like, you're always taking a risk. So is the part of the idea that it's going to help mitigate that risk because it can give you a more accurate picture of what it's going to continue to do?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I ran into acquiring the practices that I did on my first DSO personally. And the thing that frustrated me most is that most of the time, you know, the rule of thumb is somewhere between 70 and 85% of 1 year's revenue is sort of what a single dental practice goes for. Yeah. And that's been the conventional wisdom. And there are appraisers out there, but for some reason, it always seems to come into that range. So it's interesting how that happens. And I always thought, well, that doesn't tell me anything. I want profitability. I want to know what sort of profitability is embedded in this business. And so I always valued every business I purchased on a multiple of EBITDA and understanding the EBITDA, which is how investors do it. And most people back when I was doing it 10 years ago didn't do it that way. And so therefore I wanted larger practices. And so the huge benefit of this product is that in a transaction, instead of like investors now, they will do 30, 50 charts, audit 30, 50 charts for, you know, make sure the compliance is appropriate, legally it's appropriate, and, you know, basically that they're not doing anything wrong. And what this is going to do is allow buyers, whether investors or single practice, you know, purchasers, single practice, solo doc, it will allow them to actually get a 360-degree view instead of a handful of charts that are super expensive for a large law firm to audit. And so if there's 18, so I have a friend, he had, I think, 18 or 20,000 charts in his group. Wow. And I think they audited 50 of the charts. So how, like, that's just a small sliver of what's actually happening. You don't know what you're getting. It's a checkbox. Yeah, it's a checkbox. It's a checkbox for, you know, their list that they'll go to their investment committee and say, we did the compliance work. Well, this will give you a 360-degree view of every single chart, what's in that chart, and what's undiagnosed in the treatment that's detected by the AI. I mean, there's so many pieces of it, but it will ultimately allow you, like you said, to be able to have a greater transparency as to what's really in a practice and what the investor or single doctor is buying. And that is, I think, essentially insurance, and it's going to greatly lower the risk of failure or, you know, buying a practice or even a dental group and getting something different than what you thought. It's so transparent. So I think it's going to, you know, really change the way these transactions are done.
That's really cool. And obviously, you know, you can't talk a whole lot about it, but I think this is the future for sure. So what's the difference? I know you're founder and CEO of both the DSO project and Dental Capital Partners. Can you explain the difference between those two?
Sure. Yeah. You know, DSO project was started really out of because I was being asked by a lot of folks in the space to help them. How did you do what you did? I was on I would say the first early wave of what we're experiencing now in terms of you know, emerging medium-sized groups being backed by private equity back in 2013 when I sold my business. And that is sorry, I totally forgot the question. Can you repeat it again?
Well, yeah, just the difference between the DSO project and the Dental Capital Partners.
That's right. Yeah. So during that period of time, I was getting asked after that transaction happened, I was getting asked by a lot of folks, how do you do it? Can you help me? And people calling me, and they say the best business is the one that the market is clamoring for. And so I did a sabbatical in 2016 and early 2017, where I traveled with my family. We basically left life. We grabbed carry-on backpacks, homeschooled our kids, and went to 35 countries and 6 continents, and didn't step foot in the U.S. for a year.
That's
and
crazy.
So I stepped away from everything. And I, toward the end of that, I wasn't sure what I was going to do when I got back. I wasn't sure if I was going to be in dentistry, or I would just try to, I found out really quickly I wasn't PGA Tour material with my baseball swing. So toward the end of that, in early 2017, I said, well, I'm getting asked by all these folks to help them, or just to give them advice as they're trying to build a dental group that's sustainable and investable. Why don't I start a business? So I started, it's essentially, I call it a DSO accelerator. So it's sort of patterned after Silicon Valley's Y Combinator, where
Nice.
the initial idea was it's morphed, but the initial idea was to have essentially a founders tribe, a bunch of high potential dental entrepreneurs, and like 3 to 5 folks, and each year kind of bring them in and mentor them, both from my perspective and a peer relationship, and essentially coach them up on how to build a sustainable, investable DSO. And so I did that for a few years, and then have kind of, because I've started these other businesses, have gone to more of a model where it's shorter term consulting, not as long term, but the same idea. We help you. We go in. We do a day, to figure out what your goals are, what your vision is, how you differentiate and build a business plan, and then work with you to execute that plan until you have a sustainable, investable DSO for as long as you'd like. So that's a DSO project. And then we've recently we also have a piece of DSO project where we are bringing, like I mentioned before, bringing dentists together into a group, and forming a group with management team and systems, and allowing the doctors to obtain the vast majority of the wealth creation, which has not traditionally happened in DSOs. So that's been fun. And then Dental Capital Partners is my M&A advisory. Not an investment banker, and I'm not a dental broker. I'm sort of a hybrid of that in a way, where from my experience in my private equity transaction in 2013, there were obviously, whenever you do something big like that, we all look back and say, okay, what would I do differently? How could I get a better result? And for me, the aspect of fit was not at the forefront of how I was thinking about that transaction. And I feel like it should have been. I think fit is the primary important factor in a private equity transaction, because you're partners for years building your group. And so there was just things like, there were, as I look back, red flags that I should have noted, and just, personality fit, things like that, making sure that our exit strategy was the same, and the kind of what, why, and how were the same. And so I started Dental Capital Partners to help folks in the space, help sellers find partners based on fit, and based on, and obviously price is important, valuation is important, but I essentially match make. I get to know the private equity folks, and I get to know the sellers, and I make strategic introductions based on fit, and how I think it'll match based on the experiences that I have in the space.
Okay. And I know one of your strengths is innovative creativity. So, how do you think you've been able to leverage that in terms of these two organizations?
Yeah. So, I think like that's kind of one of my unique abilities, and maybe my most important unique ability, is that I'm kind of buck conventional wisdom, and I've have this creativity of always wanting to innovate. And part of that is born from, there's an article in Harvard Business Review and a book called Blue Ocean Strategy. Have you heard of that, Austin?
Yep. Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the businesses I do are all blue ocean strategy focused, which means you basically don't have competition. There's nobody doing what you do. There's a high amount of upside and minimal downside. There's other elements of it, but essentially, I like to start businesses that don't have any competition. And both that when I started DSO Project and when I started Dental Capital Partners, there's no direct competition. Certainly, indirect competition. There's always consultants out there, and there's always investment bankers and dental brokers out there, but nobody doing it the way that I was doing it, and really felt like making the competition largely irrelevant in both of those businesses. And and part of I think the secret sauce of what I do is in those businesses is that I'm a dentist. So that's one. Dentists trust and listen to dentists, I think, generally more than business people. And but I happen to be a dentist who's a business person, and I've done all of it. I've worn all those hats, and I've been through transactions, and I've built a sustainable DSO, and so I think that makes it really unique. And so I think that just the fact that nobody had ever created a DSO accelerator when I created it, and since there's been several that have popped up, and a couple with dentists who have done it. So I feel like it's almost like I kind of created a new little niche in the space, which kind of makes me feel good.
Yeah.
But
that's like the definition of entrepreneur, right? Like,
yeah. And then in Dental Capital
sometimes.
Partners, Dental Capital Partners, again, there's most of the time it was, well, I can have a dental broker sell my practice, or I can go to investment banker, or I can try to do it myself, and created a new niche where you have an advisor that can help, that's worn all those hats, that's sat in the CEO seat like you did, that's a dentist that can help you navigate those waters. And transactions they're tough, they take time, and they're often not what people think in the end. And so my goal is to kind of smooth that out and have it be more predictable and make better matches. So I think that's how it's, that kind of creativity and innovation has been manifested in those businesses.
So what's the kind of perfect avatar for you? Like, was there a certain size that is like a sweet spot for you to work with?
Yeah. So usually in DSO Project, we like clients and like to work with entrepreneurs who have been at it for a few years. So not necessarily a single work practice or 2 location or even 3 location dentist that or business person who is trying to build a DSO, because there's some things like you need to know how to run a really good single dental practice before you branch out. And so what we found is if we took on folks who had just a couple of locations, they really hadn't even figured out how to build one really good, amazing practice. And you need that. So I would say the sweet spot for us is kind of like 4 to 5 locations on the low end to, 20 locations. We've worked with folks larger and smaller, but that's sort of the sweet spot for those reasons.
You said about 20 locations?
Yeah. 4 to 5 on the low end, 15 to 20 on the high end to begin, because then we help them scale up from there. And so, but what we found is by the time you get to, if you're at 30, 40, 50 locations, you probably have a lot of those characteristics figured out, because it's so hard to get past that kind of 4 to 5 to 7 to 8 is, I call it the dark tunnel. Or,
yeah, I've heard of that.
That's the part where a lot of people don't get through, and we are really good at helping people power through that. I have a client that started right out of school, and only person I've ever worked with right out of school, but he had been a real estate entrepreneur before and actually owned 6 or 7 properties, had owned a dental practice, owned the building, helped manage it even before he got out. And he's acquired 11 locations in just over 2 years.
Wow.
And so we powered right through that dark tunnel, and has another 2 closing at the end of the month. So we're on rocket fuel on that one.
Wow, that's great.
It's been super fun.
What's the real estate strategies that you guys are using? Because there's several different facets, right? Like, first of all, you always got to question ask the question, should I buy or rent? Which with DSOs usually probably makes more sense to rent. And then second of all, it's also like site selection, right? And then you know, but if you are doing acquisition, then that's going to be not as much of a factor. So what are some of the things that are coming up in terms of that?
Yeah. I mean, I built my original DSO almost exclusively through an acquisitive manner. So we were acquiring practices, but not the buildings. And I actually love the real estate investment aspect of it. But for me at the time, I was putting everything in the DSO. Like you said,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little more capital intensive on the real estate side. So but I do have clients who have essentially created a separate real estate company and are purchasing all or as many practices as they can, and you know, essentially looking at, you know, eventually maybe selling to a REIT or selling to you know, another real estate type company. And you know, I think that on the long term, if there are strategies that you have the cash to do it, or you have the resources through, you know, a partnership, you know, to be able to get into real estate, the long term kind of return on investment it can be higher than on the DSO if you do it right, as you know. So I think, you know, I mean, my personal experience has been not focused on that. But hey, if you want to talk about leases, Austin, I'm all over that. I've done a million of those. So, but that's how, you know, I mean, I've worked with folks who are really savvy on the real estate side. And I think if, you know, they're the wealth potential, the wealth creation potential in working with an expert that knows what they're doing to help you navigate that and create the right strategy is I've seen some great success with it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's like you said, you can do it generally for most people. Investing in their business is going to get them a lot better returns than investing in their real estate. But like you said, if you do it correctly, yeah, you can generate a lot of wealth on the real estate side, which is what we focus on too.
Yeah, and I've known folks who actually do better on the real estate side. And because that was kind of the conventional wisdom when I was doing it too, and so I focused more on the DSO side initially. But I've seen a couple of folks that I don't want to out them necessarily publicly, because I'm not sure if they want to be, but that have actually, you know, built a great DSO, but the real estate side, especially over the long term, can be really really, you know, substantial. And I mean, look at the largest DSO at Heartland Dental Care. I mean, you know, they own the, you know, and I don't know the exact mechanics of it, but I know, you know, Rick Workman has been very involved in that real estate side and owns a lot of the Heartland real estate, and has created a lot of wealth through that. So, you know, there's so many ways to skin the cat, and it's just a matter of understanding the landscape and finding the right experts to really help you navigate that.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it definitely it definitely helps having the right people on board, right? Because we all think we can do it ourselves, but there's just so many mistakes that you make learning, right? And so if you can avoid those mistakes, that's what helps. And so yeah, we always say find an expert, you know, find somebody who's done a lot of deals in your industry. Now, like, it doesn't have to be us, right? I mean, we would love to work with DSOs in that regard, but just somebody who's done like at least 10 deals, you know, whether that's on the brokerage side or the development side or the acquisition of the building side. Find someone who actually, you know, who knows the industry. You don't want to give a charity case, right? Like to help your friend or your golfing buddy or your cousin or whatever when there's this much at stake.
And they don't teach it, like as we established earlier, they don't teach you that in dental school at all. Like that, they try to teach you some other components, but not really much on the real estate. I don't think anything on the real estate side, at least in my education. And it is an education. You know, you need to work with somebody who knows what they're doing.
And so are the DSOs, are they primarily acquisition based, or do you have anybody doing de novos, or what's the ratio there?
Yeah, I would say most of my clients are acquisition focused, and part of that may just be selective toward that because that's my expertise, right? So I have done de novos and I have worked with clients that do some de novos, but it's always been more of a minority component of their overall growth strategy in location. So Yeah, mostly acquisition, and I think it's just self-selected because that's really my expertise.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense. Like, I mean, like you said, you want them to start with their own location, figure that out.
Mhm.
And then it's like you start acquiring practices. And for some people, they're acquiring distressed practices. And then at some point, it kind of evolves into, all right, well, I don't want to buy the distressed ones. We got some backing now. Why don't we just pay a little bit more for ones that are actually working? And then
Yes.
at some point, it gets to like, okay, like I kind of hit everybody in my niche. If I'm going to keep growing, I got to start doing de novo, right? And so there's like kind of like a path that we see similarities,
Yep.
not all the time, but
Right.
oftentimes you see it kind of go down that path.
Yeah. If you're getting the demographics right and you're working with the right folks that know how to do that, then I think often it's sort of opportunistic where we have this great opportunity to fill in our hub and spoke model, and so a de novo makes sense in that area. And so yeah, it's I see a lot of that, and that's generally what I see is sort of that approach. And I'll say one thing that just popped in my mind, that's probably going to blow a lot of your listeners' minds. But when I was so this was I would say early last decade was kind of my sweet spot after I bought my partners out, where I built it for several years, brought in PE, and then a couple years after that. And so no one at that time in the Pacific Northwest, where I was focused, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, um, was wanted to touch $1 million plus practices.
Wow.
I mean, now that's all people want, right?
Yeah.
But then, like, so it was like shooting fish in a barrel and my close rate was super high because there was no competition. The general industry hadn't caught up to the fact that the cash flow inherent in those large, practices. I bought practices up to over $4 million in revenue, annual revenue, but always over 1 million. And there wasn't any competition. Now it's totally flipped. Everybody wants those prices for those practices are going up. So it just made me think of
It's funny.
of that because I think the people who have been in it just in the last 5-6 years, I don't think would realize that it used to be the practices everyone wants right now were the ones nobody wanted 7-8 years ago, 10 years ago.
Oh man, yeah. Hindsight is always 2020, right? If only you could know. But it sounds like you were ahead of the curve on that. So congratulations on that.
Luckily, yes.
Well, this is great.
Luckily, yes.
So for everybody listening, they want to get in touch or reach out to your organizations or what's the best way to do so?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best way is just Dr. Dixon at dsoproject.com. And my last name has an S in it, so it's DRDIXSON at dsoproject.com.
Cool.
And I also have Dr. Dixon at dentalcapitalpartners.com if that's kind of what you're looking for. But the email is probably the best way initially. And I also am on LinkedIn quite a bit. So please, please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can read more about me there. And I'm pretty active there and talk with folks and have made a lot of connections and have helped people out through that as well. So LinkedIn's another good spot for me.
Awesome. Well, I got those in the show notes and we look forward to connecting again here.
All right, Austin. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.